Oh, hello. In today's video, we're returning to Star Wars Shatterpoint because yesterday they previewed all of the rules for the upcoming This is Rogue One Squad pack. So here comes my reaction. I will slot it in to the Rebels ranking that I've done previously, and I will give some list building thoughts. So the Rogue One Squad pack, we get Jyn Erso, Bodhi Rook, and Baze Malbus and Chirrut Imwe. We're going to look at them in detail in a minute or two, but let's just get an overview of what we're dealing with here. So Jyn Erso is the primary. She brings 8 squad points, and that's divided between 3 points for Bodhi Rook, the secondary, and 5 points for Baze and Chirrut, who are the support. So 5 points support, 3 points secondary, 8-point primary, all in the era of the Rebellion, because eras are slightly off. I think they should be the tail end of Age of Empire, but let's not get into that ramble again. Jyn brings 3 Force, right? So a reasonably standard pattern for a box. Not, I guess, the most standard. The most standard be 8, 4, and 4. So this is 8, 3, and 5. But let's get into it. So we're going to start with Jyn Erso. Before I begin, and they're going to make a Star Wars nerd point, right? It really bothers me that you'll know that the Shatterpoint cards always have quotes. So we're going to have straight away, if we do any rules, we're going to have a Star Wars deep cut. So the Rogue One film was written, and it was apparently really bad. And then Disney brought in Tony Gilroy, who was the director of Andor, who would go on to direct Andor, I should say, to fix Rogue One, and he re-edited it, and he did reshoots, and he completely changed it. As a result of this, there's a lot of scenes, and you can go and look it up on YouTube if you type in like Rogue One trailer scenes not in film. There's a lot of scenes that only exist in the Rogue One trailer that aren't in the film because there's a lot of unused material that was cut out. 3 of the 4 quotes on Jyn Erso's card only feature in the trailer. So the "This is a rebellion, isn't it? I rebel" exchange only exists in the trailer. Reckless, aggressive, and undisciplined is actually a Mon Mothma quote talking about Jyn Erso. And the only one that's actually from the film is "The time to fight is now," which is from Jyn's quite powerful monologue to try and persuade the rebels to actually go and do the thing. I'm slightly irritated because what I would do is I would have called the tactic "The time to fight is now," which would free up the identity to be called "Rebellions are built on hope," which to me is the iconic line. And they could have given it to Cassian. He said it first. Well, the bellhop on Gorman said it first, but within the realms of Rogue One, he said it first, she said it second, but they should have used it somewhere. Anyway, that's my Star Wars nerd rant over for the moment. If you can't have a Star Wars nerd side rant in the middle of a Star Wars Shatterpoint video, where can you put it? So let's read the card. So we're going to start with the bottom with the identity, which I like to do on primaries because I often find that you can really get the measure of whether or not you like a primary by the identity. So her identity is "The time to fight is now." When an allied Rebel Alliance unit would spend 1 or more force to use an ability, if you don't have enough ready force, you can instead spend 1 momentum. Additionally, once per turn, when an opposing player gains 1 or more momentum, 1 character in this unit may heal. Now, this is a heck of a thing, isn't it? So it's super interesting. You're always able to use a force ability when you need to, but your momentum, remember, are essentially your victory points, are essentially your win condition. So you do have to worry about them. Now, this ability is interesting. Certainly, I've had games where I've had more momentum than I know what to do with. I've been max on momentum, generating momentum for constantly getting momentum as part of the catch-up mechanic, not quite managing to bring the central cube, the actual struggle token, back into my half, with all the momentum that I could eat. But most of the time, the momentum's quite a close run thing in terms of deciding who wins the game. So it's you don't want to spend momentum left, right, centre. That said, there might be times when you can look at it and go, well, I don't have the force to do this, but if I spend the momentum here to do this, I might be able to, wound a guy and get a momentum back and then score this point, right? And therefore get a return on my investment. Now, there are some interesting nuances with this that you may have missed on the first read through. The first is you can only choose to spend the momentum if you don't have enough ready force for your ability. So you can't, not sure you ever would, but you can't decide to hoard force, right? Likewise, you can only do this when a Rebel Alliance unit is spending force. So even if you're playing all Rebels, but you're playing on something like Never Tell Me the Odds, you can't use this to challenge the odds, right? Not that you ever would, because you'd be spending momentum to gain momentum, but you can't do it. And then also, one thing I missed on the first read through, you can spend 1 momentum to pay the force cost. Now, so where this shines the best, right, is if you've got someone that's maybe been wounded twice, so their force costs, things that cost 1 force, are now costing 3. If they had anything that cost 2 force, it's now costing, 4. And then you can spend 1 momentum to use an ability that you would never have been able to afford because it's a 3 or a 4 cost ability. That feels quite good. And I guess that's quite thematic, right? Along with Cassian's box, these guys are all about like pulling out wins from very desperate situations when everyone's looking a bit half dead, because that's thematically what happens in the film Rogue One, right? I don't know how to rate this ability. This is one of those things where I look at it and go, look, I really need to get some games and some table time in with this to properly, truly, intuitively understand how useful this is. My worry about it is that compared to some identities where, maybe you've got a revenge trigger, so your opponent's having to think, oh, do I want to wound this guy or do I want to stop short? Or maybe you've got a trigger like when anyone in your team wounds something cool happens. Those kinds of triggers are constantly affecting the game. But with something like this, I don't know. I think you could go through an entire game and never use it, and that kind of feels bad. I'm going to look at a tactic now. So a tactic is called This is a Rebellion, Isn't It? Choose this unit or an allied rebel supporting unit. One character in the chosen unit may dash or make a 5 dice attack. So this is complicated. You can hand out a dash for free, but it has to be to a support. And it's only to one of the characters in that support, right? Compare this with Princess Leia, who can hand out a dash to anyone, and if she hands out a dash to a support, both halves of the support can move. So it's a kind of a weak and restricted dash ability, right? But you can choose to use it on yourself, or you can make a 5 dice attack. Now, 5 dice attack's tricky because obviously being a tactic, it always has to go at the start of the activation. And if we just have a quick look down below, she's only got range 4 on her guns. So you're going to have to be somewhere when you activate where you can make that 5 dice attack. So it's not going to happen if you draw her early game. But once the game gets going and everyone gets into the middle, it's likely to come up. Now, I think ideally you want to be doing the 5 dice attack if there is one, if you have one available. Otherwise, the dash isn't bad. Might you do a 5 dice attack with a support? I mean, you could. Generally speaking, supports, like, it's a single unit, so it's half a support. So generally speaking, it's not going to be as worthwhile as being able to do a 5 dice attack with Jin. Yeah. I'm going to skip. Well, no. She's got reckless, aggressive, and undisciplined. It costs a force. This is fearless and inventive by another name. So you pay a force. When a character in this unit makes a melee attack as part of a combat action, before dice are rolled, you can use the ability, add 2 to the attack roll for each enemy character other than the target that is not wounded and is engaged with one or more characters in this unit. It's decent. It's a decent ability. I don't know. Maybe she's going to be in melee a lot. Maybe she's going to be in melee with multiple enemies a lot. She feels like she wants to be shooting to me more. I don't know. It's nice that it's there. It doesn't synergize with any of her other kit. It costs a force. It's not something you want to really, I think, aim for, but it's a strategy that you have available to you. Then she's got I Rebel. When a character in this unit makes an attack, after the effect is resolved, the unit may use this ability. The character may dash. You can use this up to 2 times during the activation instead of your normal one. So if, when you activate, you're in position to do that 5 dice attack, you can do the 5 dice attack and then dash. And then later in your activation, you can do another attack, and after that attack, you can dash. So she is very mobile, but it's weird because the dashes have to come after the attacks, right? And often we think about moving up to be in range or able to make the attacks that we want to make. Okay. I think she's a really interesting character, but I think she's definitely one that I want to play with to see how she feels on the tabletop, because she's doing a lot of stuff that's a little bit strange, and she's not doing a lot for the rest of your team. And I generally tend to like characters who, at the very least, are throwing out a dash. Who are throwing out a dash towards your friendly characters. And I think if you're not doing that, then you need to be something very, very special. Like the Mandalorian, for example, is a great example. He's very selfish. He's very selfish primary, doesn't do anything for the rest of your team, but he has diceless displacement. He's very difficult to kill. He's got an excellent range attack, excellent melee attack. He's probably one of the best primaries in the game. Jin loses a lot of the buffs and things for the rest of your team that, say, someone like Princess Leia Charming has. And offensively, she's on par with Leia, if possibly slightly. Depends how you want. She's more flexible than Leia, because Leia needs to do a focus action, gets a dash when she focuses, but then has more dice. Jin doesn't need the focus action and can have the 5 dice attack in her turn. Leia has the out of activation 5 dice. They're very much of a par, I think, offensively, and yet, you're just losing a lot of utility if you take Jin, but you're gaining the utility of the spend momentum thing. And it really is that spend momentum thing. Like, if it turns out when in play that that's good and useful and feels good, then Jin comes out on top. At the moment, I just can't quite. You have to be quite careful with it, I think. The other thing I will say about I Rebel is, of course, being a reaction and not an innate. When she's wounded once, it will cost a force for each dash, which starts to make it a little bit prohibitively expensive, right? Especially if you're running her with Andor, which is what they kind of point you towards with the way they've released these boxes, who has limited force himself. So swings and roundabouts. Let's look at the stances. So we got resisting arrest, which is the range stance. Okay, so 7 dice in ranged, 6 in melee. And if we look at the expertise tables, she's got a pretty interesting defensive expertise table for 1. So for 1 expertise, she's getting a block and a dash. So she's always going to get to dash when she's attacked, which makes her, if nothing else, really sticky on points. You're gonna have to wound her if you want to get her off point, because you can shove her all you like. I mean, she might not roll 1 expertise, but 1 expertise on 5 dice is fairly likely. So on a point, she's going to be able to dash back. Now, of course, she only gets that dash. No, she gets it in both. She gets it in both. So yeah, she gets. You can see that over an activated assault as well. So really quite sticky in that regard, which is a good thing. And yeah, I think it's a decent number of dice, 7. At range there in the range stance. I mean, That's good. It's not 8, but it's better than 6, right? He said, super obviously. In terms of, if she's on the wrong side of a card, so if she's doing melee stuff in her range stance, she gets a crit and a hit to a crit in 1 to 2, which is not bad, and 2 crits and a dash on 3 and above, which is not bad. I'd love to see 2 full crits on 2, but a crit and a hit's not bad, right? A hit into a crit's not bad. It just sometimes doesn't quite deliver for you. And then her actual ranged expertise on her ranged side, you've got that 2 crits on 2, which is what I kind of look for. 1 crit on 1, 2 hits on 2 to 3, and then if you get to a 4, it's 2 crits and a hit into a crit. It's not the best and brightest ranged expertise I've ever seen, but it'll do. And in terms of the tree, she can do 5 damage on 3, which is great. She can do 2 shoves and 4 damage on 3 instead, right? Which is pretty good. She has, there's an expose there on 4. If you're thinking of getting to the top end of a tree, but that's not usually that relevant. Now, her tree, if you really do hit the big time on her range tree, you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 damage. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 successes. 10 damage. Is 6 successes likely when you're only rolling 7 dice? No, but it's not impossible. So, and then over on a melee side here, so you just swap the attack dice. So we go to 7 attack dice in melee and 6 in defense. Her defensive expertise stays the same. So you've got the excellent dash on 1 in the defensive expertise to get her back onto a point if she's been shoved off, for example, or whatever else you might want to do with it. I don't want to be reductive about it, but that's the most obvious thing to do with it in my view. And then her melee expertise on her melee side, you've got those two crits on 2 to 3, and then if you get to 4, it's 2 crits and a hit or crit. And then if she's caught having to shoot on her combat side for whatever reason, she does get access to potentially a dodge. So it's mirrored, right? They basically mirrored the round. So yeah, maybe you fish for that dash if you really feel you need it. In terms of her tree here, it's quite interesting. So she can get to a disarm or an expose or a shove on 2, which is quite a choice. You might want to, if you're doing a 5 dice attack, then a normal attack. With the 5 dice, you try and expose, then you get the second attack, and you go for broke with damage. Could be an option. In terms of going for broke with damage, what does that look like? Well, she can do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, 8. So you have 8 on that side, which is not quite as amazing. But there you go. It'll do. It'll do. Yeah. I think trying to slot her into my rank. So on the left, you see how I'd ranked all the primaries on my Rebel Rundown video. I do rate her quite highly. I do kind of think she's somewhere in between Cassian and Han. Maybe below Han. Now, to address a few weird things, yeah, I rank Kanan much lower than everybody else on the internet. I'm just penalising him because he sings the hardest in his Spectres list. But like, Kanan's good. I think Kanan is very good, but I think he's overrated. So I'm perhaps underrating him as a reactionary thing. Yeah, Kanan. Oddly, Kanan is like my least favorite character on the list of primaries that I could have in Rebellion for whatever reason. So, I don't think she's as good as Princess Leia because I think she loses a lot of utility for marginal gains. But like, if that, like, it literally all comes down to how good her identity actually is and how useful it is and how it feels on the tabletop. The way I tend to think about the primaries in Rebellion, right? She fits right in there. She's definitely, I think, in the top 4 for me, right? She's up there with Leia, Andor, and Han, because those are the primaries that you can just sort of use and do things with. I think the others all come with weird list building shenanigans or things you have to worry about or extra bonus things you can do. It's not to say that Luke, Ahsoka, Endor, Leia, Lando can't be good, but I think you have to build around them a little bit more to make them sing, which does seem like a really weird thing to say about Ahsoka, but I think Ahsoka, she's just in a weird place in that I don't think she can actually go toe-to-toe with my primaries. Anyway, this is not a whole-ass Rebels video. If you want to know exactly how I came up with this order to begin with, go and check out the big long Rebels video that contains all the other units other than this box. So I think I'm slotting her in there. Maybe behind General Solo. Don't know. Good. But I do think she's in that top group for me, of Rebel primaries, of the sort of the top 4. She might be at the bottom, but she's at of the top, but she's at the top. Let's look at Bodhi Rook. So Bodhi Rook's big thing is he's a 3-point cost, right? He has 8 health. And I remember our only other in-faction 3-point costs, we've got Luke and we've got 3PO, and they are 7 health, I think. So he's got more health, which is good. He's got Rogue One pulling away for a force. So choose an allied Rebel Alliance unit within 4. One character in the chosen unit may dash. And then if it's a spy, one character in this unit may dash. So really interesting here. It is paying a force for a dash for me and a dash for thee with a range restriction and a tag restriction. So first thing you look at it and you go, well, that's quite bad. And then you look at it again and go, well, the thing of it is, I suppose, that he can always just dash himself twice because he is a Rebel Alliance unit within 4 of himself and he is a spy. So for a force, you can dash and then dash again. I think that works out as longer than a normal move, right? Because you dash, place the base, put the template back down, and then dash again. So that, even if that's all you ever do with it, that's quite powerful. It's also really important to notice that that is a tactic, so you can do it at any point during his turn, which is relevant. He's got another ability called I Just Need an Open Line, which is free. Can I say I think this guy is an absolute lore win, because the one thing that he basically does, like his moment of heroism in the film Rogue One, is that he runs really fast towards an objective and captures the objective. Like, this guy was playing Shatterpoint in his film. So I just find that really pleasant. I'm a big fan. I just need an open line. If one or more characters in this unit are contesting an active objective that you control, and there are no enemy characters contesting that objective, roll 3 attack dice, unless your opponent spends 1 momentum. Then, if dice were rolled, gain 1 momentum for each expertise result in the roll. So, okay. The way this works is interesting. You have something like a 40, I think it's 42% chance to gain a momentum, a 42% chance to gain 2 momentum, and like it's like 40% it does nothing, 40% you gain a momentum, like 16% you gain 2 momentum, and like 1.3% of the time or something you gain 3 momentum. So if you're playing against Bodhi Rook, you want to look at it like this. You go, if they get 1 momentum, am I going to lose the struggle? And if the answer to that question is no, then odds are you want to let them roll and let them try, right? Now, look, Bodhi's super interesting. So assuming that you don't, if you top deck him, you pretty much have to reserve him. But assuming you draw him 2nd or 3rd or 4th or 5th, he activates. On a great many missions, he's going to be on an active objective. So he activates. The first thing he does is he does this, I just need an open line, he rolls, and most likely outcome is that you gain a momentum for free for doing basically nothing. That's cool. You have this very small chance to win the lottery and get 3 momentum. Now, I actually think this is poor game design because every so often, one game in like 60 games or so, you're going to go, okay, struggle 1, cool. Second activation of my turn, Bodhi Rook, cool. I just need an open line. You're stopping it? No, you're not stopping it. Oh, what's this probable roll? Oh, sugar, I roll 3 expertise. I get 3 momentum. And your opponent's just going to be like, oh, should I have stopped that? Well, no, statistically, you should have let me do it. Feel like I just got sort of screwed pointlessly. Yep. So I don't know if I like that ability, but you know they do like their randomness in Shatterpoint. And I realized I said earlier that I like it. It delivers on the theme of Rogue One because, like I say, this character's crowning moment of awesome. He spends most of the film kind of in a pretty sorry situation. He gets tortured by Saw Gerrera, and then no one wants to trust him because he's an Imperial pilot, and blah, 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 blah. And the one thing he does, he literally runs to an objective and plugs in his kit and saves the, well, to a great extent, saves the day, right? He plays a significant and important role in transmitting the Death Star plans to the Rebel fleet. So, really thematic, really cool. On the tabletop, interesting, potentially a little bit of an MPE though. I don't know. Let me know what you think. I don't like making my opponent sad so near the start of the game, right? I don't know. And then his last ability is, Galen said, I can get it right by myself if I was brave enough. Allied Rebel Alliance characters within 3 that are contesting one or more active objectives have steadfast. Allied spy characters that are within 3 that are contesting one or more active objectives have immunity exposed. So first things first, if he's on an active objective, has steadfast and immunity exposed. Now, that's pretty good. So I could see a Bodhi Rook term that's like, okay, cool, activate. I just need an open line, do that, okay. And then we're going to use Rogue One pulling away. Maybe we dash a friend, maybe we don't. We dash ourselves, we move. We get onto a midline objective. If there's someone within 5 that we can shoot, we might shoot them. Otherwise, we might hunker. But in any event, there's then 8 steadfast and expose immune wounds on that objective. And that means that your opponent is then going to be tasked to remove you to get that objective. If you're square on the objective, it's unlikely they're pushing you off because you have steadfast, right? So they need to get 3 shoves. They might be able to wound you. Most things in Shatterpoint can't take someone from full to 8 wounds in like 1 knock. You know, and some of the things that can, like the Armorer or Darth Maul, do it via the mechanism of putting an expose on you first, right? So I think that's quite good. And then obviously, you know, after that first activation, what you want to do, if you've got the little bit of space in your plan, if you're not having to go and react to something else, which is what your opponent will want you to do, what is useful then is you can get something else over onto that point to back up Bodhi Rook. So if you can get the Pathfinders on there, for example, would be a good choice because they're spies, right? And then you've got a blob of 3 things on there that are steadfast and that have immunity to pin. That makes things a little bit more interesting. And the other thing is, this is a passive. So even when you wound Bodhi, which your opponent's going to want to do for the purposes of making you pay to open those lines, right, and making you pay 2 to do your dash, but your steadfast aura doesn't go away. They have to remove him from the tabletop to get rid of that steadfast and immunity to expose aura. Like he just sits there quite happily going, right, even if he's killed and wounded and standing there, his friends in his aura are still going to be standing there going, well, it's a passive, so I'm still steadfast, right? You cannot. The only way to turn it off is to kill him first. And once you've wounded him once, he's safe until he reactivates, right? So you're going to have that steadfast bubble. It's not going anywhere, and it's not being made to cost anything. It just is. So that's really solid. In terms of using I need an open line again after the main, like the first thing, I think if you assume that he gets wounded before he comes back around again, so he comes back around again, you wake him up, and then it's going to get really force expensive if you need to move him. If you need to use Rogue One pulling away, that's going to cost 2 force. Open line's going to cost another force. Do you want to put 3 force into a Bodhi Rook activation? Probably not, which is why your opponent's going to want to wound him. But it's worth saying that on those flips is when he's most likely to find an uncontested point that he can just sidle onto and get. But I really don't think I just need an open line is the main point of him. I really think Galen said I'd get it right by myself, or was brave enough is his main point, and that coupled by the fact that you're going to get I just need an open line off, like you're guaranteed to get it off once, right? I think he's pretty good because I really rate that steadfast bubble of 3, and like I said, it's on that innate, that passive, so it just doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything unless they fully kill him. I think that's pretty good, right? And it's going to help him to try and survive and stay relevant against some of those big scary things that want to expose him as well, which is pretty neat. Looking at his stance card, he has he's not underpowered. He has what we consider to be the standard things in terms of his tree. He can get a pin or a push on 1, and he can get 4 damage on 3. He can also get a bonus dash on 3 if he needs it, which is an interesting little option that he has there. In terms of his attacks, 6 dice at ranged or 5 at melee, but he is rolling 5 defense dice at range and 4 defense dice in melee, which is pretty good. Okay, so 5 range defense dice, we like that, right? His expertise trees are really bad, right? The only way you feel good about his expertise tree is if you get precisely 1, and you're like, oh, cool, I get 2 hits for 1, so I turn 1 symbol into 2 symbols, that feels okay. Rolling 2 sort of sucks. Rolling 3 isn't much better. And his defensive expertise is just really, really bad. You're never happy to see expertise show up in a defense roll for Bodhi Rook. It's bringing you nothing. So he's an interesting one. He does only cost 3 points. Let's see where I've ranked him in terms of the other things. I do think he's probably the best 3 cost. Now, we don't have within Rebels, I don't think, any like in Republic, there's arguably some 3 costs that you'd take where you could have fit a 4 cost, but you'll take a 3 cost because they're that good. I don't think that's the case in the Rebel Alliance at all. I think if you can afford to put a 4-point secondary in, you would go for one of the 4-point secondaries over any of these guys. But in terms of where I put him at the top. Now, I think it's a weird one, really. C-3PO and R2-D2, you're only taking them if you're doing a particular thing. But arguably, I think their stocks have gone down because why was I high on C-3PO and R2-D2? It's because they have a steadfast bubble. Bodhi Rook also brings a steadfast bubble, and I think he probably is doing more for you than C-3PO and R2-D2 in terms of his gun and in terms of, I mean, you can put out a dash. 3PO and R2-D2 also put out a dash. Like I'm quite high on 3PO and R2-D2. I was, but I think Bodhi Rook does their job better. In terms of him versus Luke, my limited experience with Hero Luke is that he runs forwards because he's got a lot of movement, and then he dies. He's got 7 wounds, and that feels like a really harsh break point. And I realise I'm putting a lot of weight on that 1 extra wound, 7 to 8, but it feels super relevant to me. Now, I think Daring Luke has a place, arguably, in this box with Jyn Erso. If you're trying to make Jyn Erso work, Daring Luke's got a bit of a thing over Bodhi because Daring Luke can go, Jyn, before you activate, would you like a full reposition? which would then mean that maybe when you do activate, you're within range to get your you can do the 5 dice attack and then the 3 dash and then the full attack, right? And you can get your full damage potential out because Jin really doesn't want to be starting in her deployment zone, and a dash doesn't quite cut it, and a full repo might, right? So there is that argument to it. But otherwise, I think he generally does a lot of what Luke does, but with other things, and his gun is pretty comparable. So I rank him at the top of the 3 points, but I don't think any of these are bad. I think they all have places in lists where they have places. But I think he is king of the 3-point secondaries. Baze, Malbus, and Chirrut in Wayne. The most complicated and potentially the most exciting card of the 3 in this box, I think. Now I'm going to read these in a weird way, because I'm going to read the 2 that don't have anything to do with their stance cards first. So, I fear nothing, for all is as the Force wills it. This is their tactic. They have a tactic, a support with a tactic. At the start of their activation, refresh Force. No ifs, no buts, no conditions, just have a Force. Right? Then, for each wounded and injured token the unit has, you can refresh a Force, or you can remove a damage or a condition. Fantastic. What an amazing tactic. What an amazing tactic. It just gives you loads and loads of prizes with no downsides or anything. You just go, yeah, I activate these, cool, got Force back, awesome. These guys find their way into any list, I think, where you're running Cassian Andor. Certainly. Because not only do they have this ability, which really, really, really helps with Andor's Force problems, okay, but also they're a really good Shatterpoint target with Andor, who can give out Sharpshooter or Impact 2 when you Shatterpoint somebody. Really, really good. I think once these are properly out, I think you never play Andor without them, if you can help it, right? And then we're going to just zoom down to he's praying for the door to open. Weird one, this, and I don't think it's the main point of them. It's just a weird extra thing that they can do. That's the way I would view it. So when determining control of an active objective that all characters in the unit contest, if there's a tie, you can spend a Force. If you do, remove an opponent's control token, and if you spent a Force and didn't remove a control token, you gain a momentum. So to sum that up, sorry, if you have both of these guys on an objective, and your opponent also has both of the guys on the objective, if prior to that arising your opponent controlled the objective, then you pay a Force and remove their objective token and it becomes nobody's objective, right? If prior to that arising it was your objective or nobody's objective, you can pay a Force to gain a momentum. It's pretty interesting, isn't it, that these can pay a Force to gain a momentum, potentially, and yet Jyn Erso can spend momentum to gain Force, so it's an interesting one. But that's going to be one of those ones that occasionally comes up. I don't think that is the main part of them. I think the main part of them is the excellent tactic they have, and then all the stuff we're going to get into this. So we're going to kind of have a big wide range of conversation about stances, about we've been in worse cages than this one, and about Guardians of the Wills, because they all tie together. So we're going to look at the stances first. The stances are really cute. So Guardian training and Guardian training, so their melee and ranged expertise are identical on both. Okay. No, they're not quite. They're slightly reversed, right? So you've got the Force is with me, which is it's really difficult to explain this. Sorry. The Force is with me is essentially their melee side, right? So you can see that even though it's got the picture and the quote from the shooting character, so you can see that the on the Forces with me, they have a crit and a hit on 2 in the expertise rather than a crit and a hit waiting till 3. Okay. And then on their range side, which is I'm one with the Force, which has a picture of the guy that doesn't wield a big gun, you can see the same thing is reversed. So they get to a crit and a hit on 2 ranged versus having to wait till 3 to get to that crit and a hit. Okay, fine. Looking at the trees, it's the same tree but flipped around. Okay, so on the side that's slightly skewed towards melee, the force is with me. The tree is skewed towards damage. Okay, so it starts with 2 damage. You can go up to 4 damage on 3. You've got a push on 2. Okay. On I'm one with the force, which is the more ranged side, you've got a push on 1, but you're only getting 3 damage on 3, not 4, because your 2 damage is now right at the end of your tree. Okay. Defensive expertise on the forces with me, which is the one that slightly favors close combat, you have dashes. Okay, you have dashes in, so they can be very sticky on points on their close combat side, right? Which is really nice. Okay, so they can dash back onto a point if they roll just 1 expertise. On I'm one with the force, which slightly favors ranged, they've got what I think is a worse defensive expertise because a crit down into a hit is not that good, essentially, right? Whereas a free dash is pretty good. Okay, so how does the rules side of the card come into this? Well, when you're in the forces with me, which is the more close combat oriented side, you have steadfast and impact 1. Okay, and when you're in the forces with me, which is the more close combat oriented side, then you can spend a force to reposition. Okay, when you're in I'm one with the force, which is the more ranged side, you have cover 1 and sharpshooter 1, and you can spend a force to dash. So it's, and the last thing, sorry, for Guardians of the Wills, when you change stance, you focus. So really challenging to use them to the best of their ability. So what you could do is deploy in the forces with me, which is the melee stance, reposition, flip your stance for a focus, and then you'd be in I'm one with the force, which is your shooting stance, and then you'd be shooting with 8 dice. Okay, but assuming that you're on a point, you don't have steadfast. Right? Do you see the problem here is working out when to flip it. So if you make the principle that the thing that you want to end your turn with steadfast, but you also want to shoot, you can't get the free force because the minute you flip, you're also getting impact instead of sharpshooter. So they're a little bit challenging to use, and you have to decide what's important to you. Do you want to end the activation with on the forces with me, so with steadfast up, right? Because I can see quite often you'd want to shoot, but also end up on a point. Hopefully they go later in the game, and maybe they can get melee from the off, right? And that makes life easier. But working out how to work them earlier in the game, where maybe you can't get into melee, is a little bit more challenging. I think generally they prefer to melee. The melee sides with the front-loaded damage. So if your opponent's got someone on the mid, right, they are really good, then it goes, you go, cool, I'm going to start, I'm going to, maybe you deploy them in I'm on with the force, and you hope that they don't go near the top. So you hope that there's someone else in the mid there, and then you can go, cool, I'm going to flip to the force with me and get my focus, and then I'm going to spend 1 to do a full repo and a move, and then I'm going to punch you with an extra 2 dice. So I'm making an 8 dice attack twice with my melee tree, and then I sit in melee, and I want steadfast on the point. And then you hope that by the time it gets around to their activation again, that point's moved, and therefore you don't mind going over to shooting again to try and get your free focus if that's what you want to do. Because they have an ability to get free focus, they love being shatterpointed by Andor, because remember how Andor works is he gives them Sharpshooter 2 and Impact 2 when anyone in his team shatterpoints. So therefore you can be making like, 2 9-dice attacks, either ranged or melee. Pick your poison. That's really good. Which is why I think they're kind of stapled to Andor's card now, because they give him a really good target for his Shatterpoint, and they give him force regeneration. The only thing they don't have going for them is they're not spies, right? So they lose a little bit of synergy there, but can't win them all. So a couple of lists. First of all, very obviously, I think you can just run the cast of Rogue One. I think it's a very viable list just to run the 2 boxes together and have a lovely time. And it's certainly a list that I want to do. I really want to persuade my friend Oro at some point that he wants to come up with a Vader Krennic list, just so we can be like, I know Vader didn't actually land on Scarif, but he was the only other Imperial primary that was vaguely proximate, right? So it's not much of a what-if story. I don't know if Krennic Vader's any good, or I'm just asking him to make a weak list, but that would be quite Krennic Vader's a thing, isn't it? I've heard of it being a thing. I need to do an Empire video so I can understand Empire, right? Now, if you want to refine that list, you don't just want to play the cast of Rogue One, the best Star Wars film, then there are things that you can do, right? I've talked a little bit about, I think changing Jyn to PLC is probably all things considered an upgrade, but I want to play a lot of both and decide which actually is the best fit for me. But if you want a kind of spit take, it's probably an upgrade. You can change Bodhi and put him back to being Hero Luke. It's weird. I think Hero Luke probably works better if you're keeping Jyn, because she really likes being able to be repositioned before she attacks. I think once you go from Jyn to PLC, you probably want to keep Bodhi, but you can argue about that. I think they're also pretty close, right? And then there's the old chestnut about Pathfinders versus Commandos. I think, again, it's going to depend. If you're using Bodhi, you get even more synergy having spies, so it pushes you a bit more towards Pathfinders. And if you're using Baze and Chirrut, you've got a really good target for Andor's Shatterpoint ability, so you don't need to worry so much about having the Commandos, who can also generate free focus and are also therefore a good target for Andor's Shatterpoint ability. But maybe you're running, or you plan to play Never Tell and you really want to infiltrate, and so it's fine, right? Another list you could do, basically, I want to look at Squad 2. So one of the nice things about Bodhi is that it gives you a decent 3-point support that's not named Luke. So if you want to run Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, I don't think Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker is really good, but he is Luke Skywalker in his most badass form, right? So I think this is now, if what you want to do is run Luke, I think Pathfinders and Bodhi is the way to run Luke. If your objective is I want to run Luke, I think this is how you run Luke. Okay, and then Luke can go off and do Luke things. Bodhi and the Pathfinders can go off and really, because they're spies, so he can move them, and they can benefit from both his auras, and they can have a wonderful time together. Bodhi and Luke both give out immunity to expose, so they go in separate directions reasonably easily, right? And try and spread that out to as much of your list as possible, which is pretty cool as well. And then the Andor squad is kind of interesting there. I don't know if necessarily it's the best pairing for that Luke squad. I really just wanted to talk about 2 squads, which is basically, if I'm not bringing Baze and Chirrut in my second squad and I'm bringing Andor, I want to utilize Andor's 9 points to bring Baze and Chirrut. I think Baze and Chirrut they're very good anyway, right? You don't need them in every Rebel list. I think if you run Pathfinders and Commandos, you'd be quite happy. They are better than Pathfinders and Commandos, but they're an extra point, right? But I think with Andor, you actually drop K2SO to take Baze and Turret, and then you take one of the 4-point supports. I've said Callus just because Baze, Turret, Andor are all scoundrels, so Callus and Bodhi's a scoundrel as well, for whatever that's worth. So Callus is letting all of them reroll 2 dice with Imperial Intelligence, which is nice. You could make an argument for Sabine. You could make an argument for Chewbacca. You could try and make an argument for, I don't want to say Bausch, probably not. You could make an argument for Ezra. I mean, you've got Luke in the list. I mean, if you wanted to run Ezra, you just run Scrap Andor and run Kanan and Ezra and Commandos. Right, that's another list that's perfectly valid opposite. But I'm not going to include that in this PowerPoint because these are supposed to be lists that are showcasing like at least 2 parts of this box. Right, and then I just did a Premier list just because it occurred to me that now we've got this box, you can make Rebel Premier, you can make like a mix and match Rebel Premier or like an Anchor Rebel Premier, right? So it's that same list. It's that Luke squad. I think that really works as a squad. I think I like that the sound of that Andor squad with Baze and Turret and then Callus. They all synergize. Charming Lair because I think she's really cool. And then we'll take K2SO and then Lando and R2 just because I like 2-body support. Lando and R2 are pretty cool, right? They're Bar2, they're not awful, right? And then you could take Jin with Sabine and Rebel Commandos, which is really just good stuff in a squad. If I wasn't trying to showcase Jin's box, maybe that could be Han and Sabine and Commandos. You could just, if you want me basic, you could run Han and Chewie and Commandos. Just Han's box then, isn't it? Not a massive Chewie fan because he has to dash towards a primary, but you can kind of cheese it if you play to the letter of what towards means in Shatterpoint and put the template down and then go, well, he's going to go towards, which is secretly over there. Yeah, fiddly. There you go. Final thoughts. I'm definitely buying this box because I have Andor's box. The first thing I'm going to do after finishing this video is go back to painting. Cassian, you can't see him, he's on there. Look, there's my somewhat painted Cassian. There's decent pictures in the Discord. This box might be out soon, right? We're going to talk very, very briefly about global politics insofar as it pertains to miniatures. Please don't unsubscribe. But like Asmodee, who are the publisher of Shatterpoint, not the developer, are a French company, and they seem to suggest that This Is Rogue One and also Terror from Below and Elite Squad are all coming out next month in the UK, Europe, and Canada. Don't quite know when they're coming out in the US. It's quite interesting because AMG is an American company and they obviously design the sculpts and write the rules, but they're not the people who make the decisions about release days, seemingly. And it's pretty interesting that Asmodee notice to retailers about pre-order dates came out, and then like a day afterwards, this article got pushed quite suddenly to the AMG website. So might these things come out in not America before they come out in America? Because of course they're manufactured in China and there are some tariffy things. I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to get mad in it. It's just a thing. I'm just stating things that are happening in the world. What I would most like to hear from is people that want to tell me I'm wrong. I especially want to hear from people who want to tell me that Jyn Erso is the best thing in the entire universe, because I really want to just run all of the Rogue One guys together, because I think Rogue One's amazing, and I don't want to feel like I'm running somebody who is subpar. At the moment, I kind of do. I kind of think the only thing in this box that's really awesome is Baze and Chirrut. I do think Baze and Chirrut are really good, especially in that Andor context where he's got the 9 squad points and really benefits from having them there in 2 different ways. Do you have any interesting ideas for lists that feature this particular box? Do share them in the comments. That'd be great. Do consider subscribing, commenting, liking, etc., joining the Discord. And a big thank you to all my members, but especially to Alex, who is subscribed at the top tier, because he's a top bloke. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Really appreciate it. My parents are visiting at the weekend, so I don't know how many videos I will get to put out. At some point, there will be a Turning Point Tactics tournament review. I haven't forgotten. There's just been news. Okay. See you guys. Have a good one. Tune in next time. Cheery bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye.